Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Logan, and today we have a brand new amplifier from Emotiva. This is their new XPA Compact series. And in this video, we're going to be discussing why Emotiva decided to make this new line of amplifiers, how exactly they differ from the current XPA series, and why you might want to add one to your setup. So let's get inside the box and see what makes these new amplifiers different from the rest. As always, Emotiva ships all of their products in very high quality packaging, and our unit arrived in good shape. We get some documentation, and this thick packing foam surrounding the amplifier itself, which was wrapped in this fabric to protect the finish on the steel and aluminum chassis. And you can see we also get a couple accessories like a power cord and a trigger cord. Now as you can see, the XPA C series looks just like all of Emotiva's other 4U XPA amplifiers. But the big difference here is on the back, since these new units are actually 4 inches smaller in depth. So you can fit this amplifier in any standard 15-inch deep component rack. And Emotiva did this by moving the power supply inside the amplifier from the front over to the sides, so you get a smaller amplifier, and a side effect of this was having to remove 2 of the module slots in order to make that possible. According to Emotiva, they decided to make this design because customers were giving them feedback that their existing amplifiers were just too deep to fit in certain entertainment centers. The full-size XPA amplifiers are 19 inches deep, and once you plug in the cables, they just take up too much space in certain scenarios. And because it's still a regular XPA amplifier that works with regular XPA modules, Emotiva also offers compact versions of the DR1 and DR2 differential amplifiers, which should offer the same great sound quality in a much smaller form factor than the original. But the configuration that we got is called the 7 3.2C, meaning it has 7 channels total, 3 of which are powered with Emotiva's high-power XPA modules, which are rated to deliver 300 watts RMS per channel at 8 ohms. And the other 4 channels are handled by 2 standard stereo modules, which can provide 65 watts per channel into 8 ohms, but this is just one of many configurations. What this means is you can customize these amps with whatever modules you want in order to fit into your system. For example, Emotiva offers everything from a 1-channel version all the way up to a 10-channel version, and just about everything in between. Just keep in mind that according to Emotiva, the more modules you install, well, the more the maximum output on each module will go down. And while it is a modular amp, the modules themselves are not user replaceable, so you're going to have to send your amplifier into Emotiva if you'd like to upgrade or change your configuration. We think this 7-channel would be really useful for most surround sound systems since it provides really good power for the front stage, and the stereo modules are more than enough for running bookshelf speakers or maybe Atmos channels if you happen to have a compatible processor. So we'll be able to see if this amp can keep up with a more substantial load on every channel. And of course, taking a look at the amplifier itself, it's built very well with a solid brushed aluminum front panel and these 5 LEDs that can show the status of each installed module. But I know some of you aren't really a fan of this, so if you want, you can turn off those lights using a switch on the back. Speaking of which, on the back of the amplifier you can see our 5 module bays with 2 stereo modules and 3 high power modules, either of which can accept an RCA or an XLR connection on each channel, as long as you make sure to toggle the input on each module. And of course you have these really nice 5-way binding posts and panel mounted RCA inputs on the high power modules. On the right side, you also get a trigger input and output, along with the switch I mentioned earlier for changing the front panel LEDs, a circuit breaker rather than a regular fuse, and an AC power input with a switch. And generally, I would say that this is a very well built amplifier, just like all of Emotiva's other products, with a thick steel chassis, and the whole thing weighs in at about 46 pounds. Inside the XPA-C, Emotiva has added a ton of heat sinks for both the amp modules themselves, as well as for the switching power supply, which is part of the reason this amp can deliver so much power, while also running quite a bit cooler than our older XPA-5 Gen 2. So with all of that out of the way, it's time to put this amplifier to the test and see how it works in our home theater setup. To do that, we decided to mount it in our equipment rack using the 4U rack ears offered by Emotiva. The only problem was, for whatever reason, the holes on the back of the rack ears didn't actually match the holes on the amplifier. I'm not sure if this is a temporary issue or if they'll be releasing a different set of rack ears for these amps later down the road, but for now we just decided to mark where the holes should have been and drilled them ourselves, which ended up working perfectly fine, and with that, we were able to put the amp in the rack. And to start testing, we'll be running this in a standard 7.1 channel surround sound setup with Emotiva T3 Plus towers for the front left and right speakers, a C3 Plus center channel, and 4 Vandersteen 2CE speakers for each of the surround channels, which are all very large and power-hungry speakers. Obviously, our reference point here is the amplifiers that we currently have in our system, which are the Emotiva UPA1 monoblocks and an XPA5. And in our testing, we feel like the XPA-C managed to keep up with the demands of all of the speakers in our system. It could drive the speakers just as loud, and it didn't seem to introduce any perceivable distortion. So in that sense, it performed exactly how we wanted it to in our system. But with the lower output of the stereo modules, you should consider crossing your speakers over 80 Hz to keep from running out of headroom. That said, for the vast majority of systems, I could definitely see the XPA-C being a great choice, even with more demanding speakers, and it's going to get you a lot further than the power built into most AV receivers, for example. I would say the sound out of the high power modules was pretty comparable to our UPA1 monoblocks, which is really impressive considering how big and heavy those amps are. We also went ahead and swapped out the 4 surrounds for Atmos channels, driven by our RMC1 processor, and that also worked just as expected, with even more headroom for the lower power speakers that we cross over at a higher frequency. So generally, we feel like the XPA-C amplifiers are a pretty good option for anyone that wants a lot of customization potential with their setup. But with the configuration that we tested today coming in at $1,899 from Emotiva's website, which is the same as their regular XPA series amplifiers, you're going to need to consider which one might be most appropriate for your situation. And with all that said, I think it's just about time to wrap up this video, so make sure you take a look at the XPA-C on Emotiva's website, and we'll be sure to leave a link in the description so you can go ahead and check that out for yourself. Please let us know if you have any other questions or comments down in the comments section below. If you thought this video was helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our future content. And as always, have an awesome day.